Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Syafika Putri Ahmad from class A. In this video, I will tell you about the early story of Harry Potter, the boy who lived, as in English, for a specific purpose final assignment. Here we go. Chapter 1. The Boy Who Lived. Mr. and Mrs. Darcy of a number 4 private drive were proud to say that they were perfectly normal. Thank you very much. They were the last people you would expect to be involved in anything strange or mysterious because they just didn't hold with such nonsense. Mr. Darcy was the director of a firm called Grunnings, which made drills. He was a big, beefy man with hardly any neck, although he did have a very large mustache. Mrs. Darcy was thin and blonde and had nearly twice the usual amount of neck, which came in very useful, as she spent so much of her time craning over garden fences, spying on the neighbors. The Dursleys had a small son called Dudley, and in their opinion, there was no finer boy anywhere. The Dursleys had everything they wanted, but also had a secret, and their greatest fear was that somebody would discover it. They didn't think they could bear it if anyone found out about the Potters. Mrs. Potter was Mrs. Darcy's sister, but they hadn't met for several years. In fact, Mrs. Darcy pretended she didn't have a sister, because her sister and her good-for-nothing husband were as undursleyous as it was possible to be. The Dursleys shuddered to think what the neighbors would say if the Potters arrived in the street. The Dursleys knew that the Potters had a small son too, but they had never even seen him. This boy was another good reason for keeping the Potters away. They didn't want Dudley mixing with a child like that. When Mr. and Mrs. Darcy woke up on the dull gray Tuesday, our story starts. There was nothing about the cloudy sky outside to suggest that strange and mysterious things would soon be happening all over the country. Mr. Darcy hummed as he picked out his most boring tie for work, and Mrs. Darcy gossiped away happily as he wrestled a screaming Dudley into his high chair. None of them noticed a large, tawny owl flutter past the window. At 8:30, Mr. Darcy picked up his briefcase, pecked Mrs. Darcy on the cheek, and tried to kiss Dudley goodbye but missed, because Dudley was now having a tantrum and throwing his cereal at the walls. "Little tyke," growled Mr. Darcy as he left the house. He got into his car and backed out of number 4's drive. It was on the corner of the street that he noticed the first sign of something peculiar, a cat reading a map. For a second, Mr. Darcy didn't realize what he had seen. Then he jerked his head around to look at again. There was a tabby cat standing on the corner of the private drive, but there wasn't a map in sight. What could he have been thinking of? It must have been a trick of the light. Mr. Darcy blinked and stared at the cat. It started back as Mr. Darcy drove around the corner and up the road. He watched the cat in his mirror. It was now reading the sign that said private drive. No, looking at the sign, cats couldn't read maps or signs. Mr. Darcy gave himself a little shake and put the cat out of his mind. As he drove toward town, he thought of nothing except a large order of grills he was hoping to get that day.